Welcome to Philly Coco presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 78. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Coco Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, watchOS, and visionOS development. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey. Whew. All right. Add a little bit of spice in there.
You've been practicing on your day off?
Yeah. Practically a week off at this point.
Oh, really? You've been off?
Yeah. Got to use up those vacation times. You know, they don't roll over.
Oh, mine do roll over until you hit the limit, which I have. So I really need to take scheduled time off for the winter, and I usually take a nice long break around the Christmas season.
Yes, please do.
This is going to be the penultimate episode of 2024.
And what do we have today? We have, first, I guess we can sort of talk about some news, although we're 2 days in, as of the time of this recording, we're only 2 days in of a 3-day set of announcements from Apple. First day they came out with new iMacs M4. And then the second day they came out with a very small Mac Mini, which I am sad to say we waited. We didn't wait long enough, Aaron.
We knew this was going to happen.
We knew this was.
Did you buy some?
At work, we did. We bought one, and it was like it wasn't an M2. It was the older model. It was a prior model, but we got an M4. And a small one at that. Like I'm gonna look at ours and I'm like, man, ours is like huge. But the Mac Mini actually looks pretty nice. Like
it's awesome looking. I think the thing that's most hilarious to me about it are the people complaining that the power button's on the bottom.
Oh, geez, whatever.
Who turns their Mac off?
That's what I was wondering. Also, I think it's primarily because the bottom's plastic and the back is all metal, and look at how like it's all aligned perfectly. Who wants to put a power button, mess up that perfect alignment in the back for something you're going to press like twice a year or something?
Yeah, I mean, I get the power charger under the Mac the
mouse thing,
the
too.
mouse, but like
yeah, like
okay,
Apple's going to redesign the mouse. Like, okay, like obviously don't care. It's just like it's an add-on given to you for the iMac that almost nobody buys anyway. So it's like, I love how people just get really up in arms about stupid stuff nowadays. But the Mac Mini is beautiful, and it's small. I couldn't quite tell. How does it compare to an Apple TV box? It's a little bigger, right? I don't know how big the box.
Oh, go ahead.
It looks like it might be a little bit bigger, but it's definitely taller.
Let's see. We're looking at the Apple TV, which is
so the height is
3.6 by 3.6.
The height is like 1.2.
Yeah, so the other one's 5 inches. So the Mac Mini's 5 by 5 around, and then taller than this.
Okay,
and this is like 3.6 by 3.6.
I wonder what's going to happen to the Apple TV. Are they the new one going to come out anytime soon?
Probably not. I have a first gen 4K one. I think.
Yeah, same.
It feels a little sluggish sometimes.
The old paper remote.
Here is the sad part. It's in terms of like performance, this raw performance. When you compare it to any of the other set-top boxes out there, it like thrashes them by like a country mile. like it's so pathetic when you look at it compared to like any set-top box out there. You name it, Roku.
Be careful.
Other ones?
Yeah.
Whatever Google's one is. Whatever Google calls their one now.
Google's, whatever. It's just like, it's so much jank. And it's just so frustrating. When I like compared the two experiences, like I cannot believe that like this is not like on top of everybody's like, okay, we gotta beat that.
But I think tomorrow, I mean, when you're listening to this, it'll already be over, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be MacBook Pros and the M4 Max, which would be cool. But I think the Mini, unless they announce something else, like maybe an updated Studio with like an Ultra or something, I think the Mini is going to be the highlight of the week for most people. because if you look at it, I mean, the price for performance is insane. Like even the base model is actually very good.
It's like the first time I'm like looking at the base model, I'm like, that's not a bad deal.
It's a 10 core, so they're like binned until you pay extra, even in the pro version. But like it's a 10 core by 10 core CPU, GPU, 16 gigs, and 256.
I'm sorry, Steve. For people who don't know, what do you mean by bin?
Right. So the chips have a certain number of cores on them, and they go through testing when they're manufactured, and sometimes there's errors. So what happens is Apple will have the cores that are malfunctioning, like they'll have them disabled. So have fewer total cores, but the chip's otherwise still perfectly usable, just a little bit less performant. And then they can put that into the less expensive models. And that's how they, I think, are keeping the cost down with all this inflation, because everyone was surprised that it's still like $600 for the base model. And yet on paper, I mean, it's significantly improved from the previous version in every way. More performance.
That is a Tim Cook
more
efficiency
memory
right there.
Yeah. It's like it's shrinkflation for hardware.
Yeah.
You know, kind of. But the even the base model is more than enough power to do software development, Xcode, and to run the Apple Intelligence models. Since it's a desktop, you can plug in a hard drive if you need more storage.
It is a really good, almost like, especially if you have like a existing keyboard monitor.
Unlike me with my ancient Thunderbolt, not even Thunderbolt. What is this thing called? This ancient monitor, 1440p Apple monitor.
Look, it could be an XDR.
Oh my god, I can't believe it still works. I have it through like an adapter. Crazy. But yeah, if you already have setup, especially they even mentioned for PC upgraders. But I just think if you want to get into Apple Silicon and if you have a desktop setup is good for you, I think this is by far the cheapest option to get the most performance for your dollar.
Yeah, agreed. I think as long
as you got accessories already. Like
yeah. When you have to deal with accessories, we were just joking. Like we went and pressed like the select, like you select one of those cores and then you do a continue. You press the continue button. Oh no, we lost them. What's that going to do to our recording? We just lost our host. But it's still recording.
I know it is still recording. That's good. Let's hope this works.
Okay,
because it completely crashed.
Have to do it again tomorrow.
I guess.
Oh man! Hopefully this works, everybody. I should just leave this into the podcast edit because
it'd be hilarious.
Our recording platform literally just crashed.
Let's call this our transition. We were just about to joke about how much the standard display is gonna add to that cost.
Yeah,
but
that's like they'll triple your
$1,600.
$1,600. We always talk about getting that studio display money. We gotta work on that. But speaking of working on studio display money, batch weird transitions. We were thinking in this case was talking about design systems for indie developers. So there was, I forgot which episode it was. I did a solo cast about design systems, kind of keeping it in a broad context.
Episode 72.
So it wasn't too long ago. But yeah, hopefully that wasn't a snooze fest. But the idea is that I guess when you're trying to build a design system, you're trying to sort of organize a lot of your and sort of like centralize, I guess a good way to describe it, a lot of your design elements, whether it be your fonts, your brand colors, your corner radius, even your spacing. You're trying to like basically construct a sort of way of saying here is sort of like these parameters for which then you can apply it around your apps to sort of to ensure a sense of conformity, a sense of consistency throughout your app. And so a good example is like you might start off with like brand colors is a good example. Maybe you want to say like you have like your primary color, a secondary color, and a tertiary color. Just as a simple example. And then you and like maybe an error color and an info color, right? So and then and then you start there. In like in iOS world, we might put that in a color palette, right? But then you want to make sure you have a light mode and a dark mode, right? So then you have like you can do that within the within the color sets, right? In the image asset.
Yeah. So let's before
folder.
we want to get into some specifics today because we wanted to talk about where your solo cast. You're talking more about from a big company perspective, and I wanted to kind of talk about more of an indie perspective because I still think it's important if you're building like your own app that you might want to have some control over things like colors and fonts and design elements so that you have consistency and so that you can reuse elements. I think it's useful if you're just building one app for obvious reasons because you don't want to keep writing the same code over and over again and trying to remember what font you use or what color exactly, that kind of thing. But then I also think if you're an indie person and you're thinking ahead a little bit, I mean, the app can get complicated pretty fast. It doesn't take long before you have enough screens that it becomes overwhelming to try to change theming everywhere. But also, if you want to build multiple apps, you may want to have some consistency in your design elements as a brand, as you were saying, as like a brand identity. So even as an indie, I think it's important. But I think the difference is you're not going to go probably into the same level of, I don't know, like effort as you were describing in the first one, maybe. But so we want to focus on like what can you do just with Xcode, SwiftUI out of the box. Not necessarily everything that's available, but some of the big things that come up. I take this approach now because I'm building an app, even though it's not for me, but it's at work. But I'm the only developer, so it's kind of like I'm doing it from an indie perspective in some ways. So I still have to think about things like how to keep the colors aligned and use some custom fonts and even custom strings for stuff sometimes. Like so we use the same verbiage for things. That I think is all part of a design system. And the way I've been doing it is by putting it into a Swift package. But it doesn't have to be. You can just have files in your main bundle. But I would want to start with, I guess, what I think are the core ones, and you can tell me if you agree. Like the really core things everybody's going to want to control would be like colors, fonts, views. Like having standard kinds of views you're going to use multiple places, and then probably stuff like buttons and things like that, which are we're gonna lump under view modifiers and styles because we're going to talk about that, and then everything else, maybe kind of we'll touch on as we go along.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird because like you have sort of broader concepts. As weird as it's going to sound, maybe you want to have like corner radius be a token set because you want to have consistency of all your rounded corners. Like maybe you have an app that has a lot of cards, right? So the cards have to have the same consistent corner radius. It's easier just to have one as a token set. Another one is especially if you have variations. Another one is shadows. That's another interesting one. And another one is spacing. Spacing is actually really important because you need to have like a variety of range of spacing. That's another one too. Is like you need to have like you need to have like the set, right, of like, okay, here we have color, font, and then font and all the other ones, right? And then you have the sort of variations within that.
Right. So like if you're talking about view elements, like controlling view elements like spacing, shadows, corner radius, like how do you do that in a SwiftUI app? How do you implement that?
So you can use custom modifiers to do that. I guess there's a variety of ways, right? First, you have to like set up a set of like, I don't know, for like sort of like a really dumbed down version. Maybe you make an enum with a set of different type of tokens, and that you say like, oh, for this, let's say fonts, right? Let's say you have different types of fonts. So you have the title, the display, display 1, display 2, etc. Like you have your own version of that, right? Of like super bold, super thick, whatever. And then you have sizings within them. So you might even have specific tokens of different sizes.
Yeah, and we're not talking about how you come up with those. There's a good book I've been reading. I'm almost done. Design for Hackers. I actually highly recommend it as a place to turn to, so you can kind of understand how you would come up with things like what fonts I would use and what sizes you would choose, and how to fit them together. That's a good book. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about implementation. So once you figure that out,
Sure.
yeah, and enum is a good way of modeling a lot of this stuff. You have choices between them.
Yeah, in terms of modeling.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, the other caveat is like whether or not, and then it's like architecting like how you want to access them, right? Because like sometimes you want to just say, you know what, I'm just want to apply this to just a regular text view, or I just want to apply this drop shadow to any view. So you need to like say whether this belongs into a custom view modifier, or you can take advantage of pre-existing modifiers like button styles, which gets into sort of like styles that you can use within the SwiftUI ecosystem. They have like a variety of different versions, whether it be button styles.
So do you want to talk about the style stuff then?
Yeah, styles are like this weird, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but like this weird way to like take a regular view and like add its own set of modifiers to it, apply its own set of modifiers that you can also modify modify that modifier with parameters. So, and then create an extension that will like create your own custom modifier. Extension with a function in it, basically. So let's say, for example, you have
that was very clear.
I know. The thing is, it's standard practice. Kind of.
Let me read what Apple says. Apple, we're talking about view stuff. So we're talking about view styles, and Apple's like calls it applying built-in and custom appearances and behaviors to different types of views. So if you're trying to control the look and feel of your app at a view level, you can obviously create a view that you just use in multiple places. However, that's not always the best approach. We've mentioned before some movingparts.io articles that talk about this, and I've seen some talks about this, but maybe you don't want to create an actual view that wraps something like a button. You might want to just use a SwiftUI button and then apply a style to it. That way you can have the default, button everywhere, and you can take advantage of all the other functionality that comes along with it, and you don't have to like keep updating some custom view, intermediate view. So Apple has a whole documentation page, which I'll link here in the show notes, which I actually didn't realize they had. I was hoping they did because I knew about some different styles, but I didn't know they had them all on one page. But they do. So they have like button styles, picker style, menus, toggles, indicators, views that display text like label styles, text field styles, collection styles like lists, navigation styles, groupings. So all this stuff is here, and there's a protocol that you can implement to override it if you want to create your own custom thing.
Yes. Yeah, because the thing is like not all of these views that have styles have a protocol where you can customize them. Sometimes they only have like built-in options.
Yeah, that's what makes it a little bit confusing when to talk about it, because it's not super consistent. But a lot of things do have a lot of customizability. Buttons are especially
for the ones that do have the protocol that where you can basically make implement your own type that conforms to that protocol. Then it's really useful.
Yeah, and I think buttons are probably the one that you'd use the most, because buttons are everywhere in an app, most apps. So that has a style you can override.
It is funny because like not everything like you can make everything a button, but you might not want the button to act the way a button is defaultly going to act. So like if you press on something, it has its own variation of a highlight, and it does also do its own hover effect. So you would want to customize that in a button style, but maybe you don't want to have any of that. So you have to figure out a way to turn that off, or just use the on tap gesture modifier to like get around, like to make a view still be a view, but still have a clickable event associated with it. It's kind of bizarre in that sense.
So yeah, I think Apple is trying to provide hooks for doing styling at like a more of a global level, or to apply styles. But it's not like perfect, and it's not 100%. So sometimes you just gotta wrap things in views and just do it. Just do what you have to do. Sometimes you even have to go to UI Kit if you really have to do really custom stuff.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about indie, you should probably try to avoid that unless it's really integral to your app, and then just try to go as far as you can with something like button styles, because it makes it so easy. Once you create it, it's just a view modifier to activate it.
And I think if you're trying to like, especially if you have an app that has a lot of rows and columns, um, you know, custom spacing becomes a thing. Uh, Formalizing and having a design system for spacing becomes a thing, a grid system, if you will. Or if you have
Design for hackers goes into that too.
Yeah, and so like a lot of times it's kind of funny because like for the longest I was like, oh, grid systems, I don't know, like they drive me nuts because they kind of fall into sort of like the website experience. But then when you deal with stuff like, oh, now I have to deal with an iPad version, an iPad mini version, and an Apple TV maybe version, that's when things get like off the rails.
Yeah, I do find though that Apple's defaults for SwiftUI controls are usually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's you can go pretty far with just using those.
You would almost want to create tokens specific to those sizes, right? Or at least conform to like come up with a way to like say, okay, with spacing you now have, and even the sizing of your fonts as an example. Maybe you make them dramatically bigger for Apple TV because they have to be. Pop out, you need to, because they have so much screen real estate. Versus like if you're doing an iPhone, it's not as important, so you can keep the title size a little smaller.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is Apple basically already has a design system baked into SwiftUI. Like they will change spacing and stuff like that depending on what the context that the particular like element is in. So like as you're saying, you can have the fonts will adjust based upon things like how your iPhone is set up, and you can already choose the semantic sizing for things like fonts. If you use Apple's defaults, Apple will automatically do things for you so you don't have to think about it. So if you can get away with the Apple defaults, that will save you a lot of time. But if you're
dealing with like dynamic text.
That's what I was thinking too. Dynamic text is a big one. But if you want to make it all custom, they're also just a good model to work on, right? To start with, to look at how like the things you would want to override or the way you would want to override it. But it can get pretty complicated. Like using using San Francisco, SF symbols in a label, they will Apple will automatically change sizes and stuff. And
so that's another funny thing too, right? When we're talking about like custom design,
icons can be weird.
Icons can be particularly weird,
especially custom icons, because like the spacing I found is especially can be troublesome, and because it's not always the same per icon,
Yeah,
because it doesn't look right.
It's particularly if you've got to hope that your designers are exporting them out as
you're the designer in this case.
Well, okay, fair, but like SVGs, right? And then you have to decide, would it make sense, or would it be ideal, especially if you're dealing with like a dynamic font scenario. How can I make sure, let's say I have a font that's next to an icon, right? How do I ensure that icon stays the same consistency if the font goes larger? I think SF
you can always make a custom SF symbol.
I've done that. That was a special experience. I don't even remember how I did it anymore. It's
weird because like you have to download the template, right?
Yeah,
like,
downloaded the template.
You can technically like export out any of the XF symbols in the.
Which is basically what I did. I think it took me many like tries, and then exporting it and then putting it in the app. It was a real pain when I did it, and it was a couple years ago or a year ago.
I think it's a lot better now. I remember seeing the WWDC video that like it's not that terribly different, but it does require you to like take the template and take the template seriously. Of like, okay, put the icons within these guidelines.
So just because we're trying to do this efficiently today, because we have a hard out.
We have it right out.
We were talking about view, controlling like the view elements and using the styles when they're available. Use SF symbols, maybe custom SF symbols for that, and that kind of leads into the other big thing. So if you're not using styles and custom views, you're probably dealing with things that are in the asset catalog as an indie, right? The asset catalog has grown over time, I think, to just be very cool. Actually, it does a lot for you. So if you go in the asset catalog, you can have color sets, right? Colors for that light and dark mode, and you can have just any colors you want. You can put them in there, and you can have what else? What else can you put in the asset catalog?
Well, the app icon, obviously, for any specific version, so Mac, TV, Vision, whatever, and app, and usually now you can just have it as a
is it a PDF?
As a
no, a PDF.
You can do PDFs, but usually SVG is better, especially now that they've.
But I mean,
I forgot what their template. It's not dark mode. It's the other thing.
Yeah, but the asset catalogs, if you put in like icons in the right format and the right resolution, it'll automatically resize them for you, so you don't have to make
practically anything in there anymore, like sound, videos. I don't know whether or not that's a good idea. I've done it before.
But once you're in there, they have a name that you can access, and in the later versions of Xcode and iOS, I believe a lot of these token names then get exported as symbols you can use in your code without using a string. Like they get turned into I don't know what
like enumerated.
Yeah, like the colors will do that. That was a thing they announced at DubDub, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, asset colleagues. But so I mean, all kinds of stuff to consider as assets. You can put an asset catalog, and then just refer to it in your code.
Right.
I think, and it's a lot easier than trying to like load it from a file or system or something.
Yeah, I guess I think where ultimately these design, because what you're doing in the beginning is sort of designing the tokens and just the framing of all the sort of like the value properties. Then when you're actually building your UI components, that's when sort of it begins to start to make sense, because then you're building like a button. Let's say this is my primary button, this is my secondary button, and they're all using design systems. But then when you're building, but now you can say, okay, these UI components, it's just basically like a button with a style protocol assigned to it, a button style protocol assigned to it, and then it's your button, right? It becomes your app's specific style of a button, and that you could just place everywhere, and you can be assured that it will work the same way in all the, mutations. And then if you need to do tweaks around it, like let's say he's like, you know what, I don't like this rounded corner for these buttons anymore. I want to change it from like a rounded corner of like, 25 to like 16 points or something. You can do that, and it will change all of them. And that's kind of the power of a good design system, is that you just need to change it in one space to affect all your components.
So if you're an indie, basically we're just talking about what you're probably already doing, at least somewhat in your code, is trying to limit the number of places you have to change things. But when you start talking about design elements, putting aside how you come up with them, once you have them, like the ways you would control them and implement something like a design system is.
No, I do have a slight like caveat in that sense of like, sometimes I've seen it so that like you're doing way too much in these components, and I will employ anybody, keep the components as dumb as possible and almost as like bare bone as possible.
The KISS principle, right?
Yeah,
and I think that works with the idea, the philosophy of SwiftUI, where you really should try to work with creating as small atomic views and compose them instead of trying to have too much layout code in one file.
Yeah.
When you do that, you have an easier time, and so it also becomes easier just to manage your project and to reuse things. And I've done that. When you do get a component you make that's just the right size and functionality, like I made a bunch of like little buttons, like it did kind of like buttons to open email and do a phone and stuff. And like I made them and I used them all over the app. And I just have one little place, and I can tweak the design, and they lay out the icon properly next to the numbers and everything. And it's like, that's a simple example. When you do that, it's quite liberating from a development standpoint, because you don't have to fiddle anymore.
Yeah, you do have to be careful, because it requires so much discipline to say, okay, we want this component to have this spacing, and just like, okay, but designers will always make an exception. It's like, well, it doesn't look quite right here. I want that.
Well, that's okay, but even Apple does that too. If you look at, because you have to, because you have to in certain circumstances. A key one would be something like having a symbol next to text, because different symbols have different shapes, and it doesn't always to the eye feel right. So you do have to do that. And Apple, I don't know what they do. I think the SF symbols that they create somehow adjust pretty well.
Right,
but if you're an indie, the whole point is you're trying to, I think, save yourself time and have consistency, because you need every edge you can get if you're going to be putting something out there into the wild west of the overloaded app stores. So it's like, you gotta, if you have a good design that can get you farther. I mean, it doesn't guarantee success, but without a good design, your app can seem and feel sloppy, and it can turn off customers. You don't want to be doing that. And all you have to do is take advantage of some of the built-in tools, techniques, and facilities that Apple provides out of the box, and you can go pretty far in kind of taming your design system. And that's kind of what my message is for this.
Anything to add, Aaron?
Yeah, I guess it's like, if you're gonna make a change from the built-in kind of Apple UI, then make sure it's consistent across your app. Like, don't just change like one random button somewhere.
I mean,
unless you have a really good reason, consciously do that. Don't accidentally do that.
Sadly, I have been the perpetrator, and I've been perpetrated too.
Yeah, I find though that with SwiftUI and the modern and the affordances in Xcode and asset catalogs and SF symbol and stuff, it's just a lot easier now to do this than it was like 10 years ago in UIKit. I just find it much more enjoyable to work in
remarkably
the UI
easy
now.
to override your overrides that override the overrides. So for a design system, I think building it in SwiftUI is actually quite. I think it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just look up view styles, and asset catalogs, and that's like, I don't know, like 70% of it right there.
Maybe do SS symbols. Your mileage may vary. I think they're telegraphing you. They want you to go there, but like.
Oh, I use SF symbols, but I do find that they keep adding more and more. But I still run into problems where I can't find exactly what I want, but I just make do, because I'm not going to design a whole
like, if you're going to build like their own bespoke set.
Oh no, yeah, you should go through the pain.
Yeah,
go through the, because once you do it, it makes it's much nicer to work with than I guess what would you loading custom images,
just regular SVGs, and then
SVGs. I mean, I think it's
the challenge
fine.
With that is it varies, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, once you do it in the SF symbols, then it'll fit better in different circumstances if you've done enough work. And you should do it. Do the work up front. That way, when you're building the app, you don't have to think about it anymore. Just slot it in the right spot, and it's taken care of.
Boom,
that's what you want.
Done.
This is done.
Okay. Well, in that case, let's call it a day. Call it for today. That's all we have. You can learn more about Philly Cocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you have links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, leave a review on our Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is. And please share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Today, I just want to promote Happy Scale again. Our good friend Russ.
Happyscale.com.
Yeah, so what is Happy Scale?
Happy Scale is a weight tracking app.
If you are struggling with trying to maintain your weight or trying to get a better sense of recording your weight, it's a very good tool to use.
It allows you to log your weight, which is obvious, but it gives you reports, and it also has these milestones to help give you motivation. It has multiple different algorithms to try to smooth out your charts of your weight loss journey here, so you can, be informed of what's going on without seeing all the spikes. There's a lot of cool features in there. It is a very full-featured indie app I don't know if he implemented a design, system, but it seems like there is a design system in this. And it's a very good example of an indie app that is very well designed all the way through.
Does it have AI in there?
You know what? That's the one thing he might not have put in one buzzword. It might not be in there yet. I don't know. What would you use AI for this?
I don't know. Like a very, very happy-go-lucky, person to hype you up, a hype bot,
hype man, hype bot. So he could just burn money on the tokens so that it can give you motivational snippets or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
you could also just pre-write them. Like, there's way simpler ways of doing it. But
listen, you could technically pre-write
use
them,
an LLM to generate like 1,000 of them and stick them in.
You can use the
bundle.
say command to generate through the command line to generate or the text to speech right there, and just tweak that. You could do that.
But
well, anyway.
I especially like about Happy Scale that it has this predictions mode where it'll predict, like, if you stay at this current rate, like when you're going to reach your goals, what your commitment is, what your actual rate is. It's very, very, very useful. And I have data in this going back years. So I've seen how I've gone up and down and up and down, and now I'm going down again. Hopefully for the last time, I want to go down and stay there. That is the goal. And Happy Scale is my companion in this fight.
Fight the fight.
My weapon.
All right. Well, till next time.
Against fatness. My weapon against fatness.
Till next time. Good luck on your own developer journey or fatness journey. Diet journey.
Diet journey. Health journey, whatever.
We're cheer for you always.
Who turns their Mac off?